All right, so these are mistakes that I've made as well. So in this video, we're gonna break down 10 mistakes new screenwriters make. Stay tuned. Mistake number 1, block text.
Okay, so I'm gonna write everything that I see in my head, gonna put down there.
Listen, we've all done it before. We want the reader to see exactly what we have in our head, right? You just crunch every single sentence you could possibly muster into one big behind paragraph. And you do that so that, the audience gets a crystal clear image of what you're actually going for. So it is true that experienced writers are able to paint very vivid pictures in the audience's mind, but they do so by using as few words as possible. You want to be poignant, direct, specific, but above all, concise. But in spec scripts, we do not want the block text to extend beyond 3 lines, really. We fall into the trap because, I get it, most of us are filmmakers, right? We write the film, we shoot the film. So to kind of avoid this kind of mistake, there's a trick that Michael Haig outlines in his book, Writing Screenplays That Sell. It's a trick on how us writers can also play director even if we're not directing the film we're writing. And the trick is to break up our action lines with respect to our camera cuts in our mind. The action lines that are together are in one shot. The action lines that are separated or spaced out into the next line, that is going to be the next shot. That's a little trick that I picked up by a man named Michael Haig in a book called Writing Screenplays That Sell that I'll put in the link in the description below as well. So remember, whatever you see as a shot in your mind, you want that shot to be an action line cluster, right? And so if you see a next shot in your mind, you break it up and you space it out to the next action line. Number 2, how do I write phone conversations? Let me know if you'd like for me to do an in-depth video on this, by the way. Just put something in the comments below. How do I write action lines in my screenplay? This video right there. And how's the script even supposed to look? What's a parenthetical mean? All right, here's a real brief tutorial on what you should be familiarizing yourself with as an indie film newcomer. Title page, scene heading, parenthetical, character heading, action lines, dialogue sections, spec script desired length, and a spec script versus a shooting script. Now, in many of my videos, I speak at length on all of these topics. But since you're here, for instance, a parenthetical is where you signal to your audience how the line is being said by that character. It could indicate how their character is feeling, which could tell the actor how they could be delivering their line. It tells the audience where the character's headspace is. It's essentially a note on how a particular line or how a particular action is delivered by a character in your screenplay. All right, so I know that there are certain scenes in our films that inspired us to write our movies to begin with, right? But whenever we're in a scene, we should always ask ourselves first, how is this scene propelling the plot of this story forward? And second, how is this scene making our audience feel? Because when it's all said and done, this is the reason why we're writing to begin with. We are writing our screenplays to make our audience feel an emotion, to get them to experience the emotion, which I also have a video on as well. Ultimately, we want our spec scripts to be no longer than 90 to 115 pages. The shorter, the better. Number 4, no scene headings. Scene headings should be as follows: interior for inside, or exterior for outside, dash, then the location, then the specified area within the location, dash, then the time of day. I get it. Sometimes we get lost in the sauce of our stories and we forget to indicate where we are in the movie. And also sometimes writers ask, where do I write things? How do I write things? Interior, Jimmy's house. Nope, we're not done yet. We're in Jimmy's house. Interior, Jimmy's house. Living room. That's it? Nope. After, we've got to indicate time of day. All right, let's bring it home. Interior, Jimmy's house, living room, night. Number 5, no structure. So I talk about this all the time. Structure is very, very important in screenwriting and in short film and feature film. Although in short films you could argue you have a lot more flexibility, but you could also argue that in feature films you have a lot more flexibility.
Okay, gonna have beginning, a middle, and an end.
Okay, how is it gonna end, sir?
It's gonna end with a big explosion. Big explosion.
Right, of course. So if you aren't familiar with story structure techniques, there are many for you to choose from. So which one do I recommend using? Well, there's a crap ton. I have a whole bunch of books behind me outlining at length a lot of them. There's Save the Cat's Beat Sheet, which was discovered by Blake Snyder. There's Dan Harmon's Story Circle, Robert McKee's Story Structure, Michael Haig's Story Structure Technique, John Truby's 22 Steps of Story Structure, and many, many more. There are just so many to choose from at this point, but if you want to take a look at the Save the Cat Story Structure method, boom, made a video on it. So just pick the one that you're comfortable with and roll with it. Number 6, poor syntax.
The boy run across the room to grab his pencil.
Okay, but how does the boy run across the room?
He hiding from his mama.
What's his name?
Jim.
Scurrying past his mother, Jim secures his pencil. Is it his pencil or is it her pencil?
Her pencil. He's stealing her pencil.
Scurrying past his mother, Jim secures her pencil. So although we want to keep the language in our scripts simple, we do not want to lack specificity in our verbs. This is a huge part of writing. If we indicate what our character is doing in as few words as possible, we've done a phenomenal job as a writer. We want to lace each sentence with meaning to give our stories a sense of richness and fullness to propel our stories forward as efficiently as possible. So you may find yourself Googling a lot of things to just try to brainstorm what's the quickest and most concise way to say certain things. Number 7, redundant beats. So this is a kind of a tricky one. So just because something different happens to your protagonist doesn't mean that that beat isn't redundant. So let's say your character frequently visits a location, the same location in your feature. Or if your character loses a child in Act 1, does your character lose another child in Act 2? Or does your MC suffer a similar loss that could make the audience feel the exact same way? This may be a redundant beat. Let's say you've made your audience feel an enormous sense of sadness in Act 1, and you've made them feel a very similar way in Act 2. This event that you've set up, this plot point that you've set up, may be considered a redundant beat. So yes, we do want our tone to be consistent all throughout the film, but we don't want our beats or our events in our stories to feel redundant. Does your character arrive at a similar location with a similar mindset multiple times? If so, your story is at risk for having redundant beats. Each new event in your story should push your MC to a new place internally, and if the budget permits, externally as well. Also bear in mind, the emotional experience of your story should ebb and flow and fluctuate in between various emotions, the positive and the negative. Apply pressure, release. Apply pressure, release. This way your story has a sustainable heartbeat that will propel it to its exciting climax. Number 8, lack of subtext in dialogue and story. So I'm not gonna bore you too much with this one because I wrote an entire video on it. It's right here. But this one is just so that your film can operate on multiple levels. Now, what does this mean? Well, Jordan Peele is the master of this, right? He's now created Us, created Get Out, and just recently he's created Nope. All of these films operate on various levels. So of course there's what the film means on the surface. It's okay, this character is being abducted by aliens. And then there's the deeper meaning in the trenches of the story. That's what this story is really about. And this is something that the main character learned only by going through those specific plot points that you have in your story. This is what he's discovered. This is what your plot points are pushing your MC towards, the conclusion that your plot points are pushing your MC towards. And beyond that is what you want your audience to discover the film is really about and how the film is actually related to the real world. And you only really discover both meanings, the deeper meaning with respect to the main character and a deeper meaning with respect to the world at large, you can only really discover what the film is actually about when you reach the film's climax. So like I said before, I think I do a pretty solid job at explaining what this really means in this video right here. So be sure to watch it after this video is over. Number 9, script cover art on the title page. We're not talking about you promoting or marketing your script. We're talking about your spec script. Your spec script should not contain any pictures at all, any photos, or any designs or graphics and things like that to know. If you can't explain it in words, you know, then explain it in words. Now, as the filmmaker, what I do, I have my book of imagination, which is where I write explicitly like what things mean. I draw pictures and things like that in a separate document, and it lives somewhere completely different, but not in the script. So yeah, any art materials, we want to keep that separated from the spec script. And number 10, this is the most common one I see as well. We see a spec script being written like a shooting script. We see scene numbers. We see camera angles. We do not want any camera angles in our spec scripts. Now there's another trick on how you can play director, and you can indicate camera angles and you can indicate camera movement, or you can highly suggest camera movement in your film, but you don't say wide angle or tracking shot or medium shot or close-up shot, because you, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to be producing the film unless you're an indie filmmaker. And even if you are an indie filmmaker, it's a bad habit to have, because once you're writing a script for someone else, and spoiler alert, most writers make money for writing things for other people. And again, even if you are an indie filmmaker desiring to make the screenplay, you want to utilize that spec script to leverage the spec script for money so that you can produce it yourself. And it's going to be hard for you to produce it yourself if the people who you're submitting to thinks that you cannot properly write a spec script. So you could miss out on grants, you could miss out on fellowships and things like that. And that's why we don't want to put camera angles in our screenplay. If you're a film newcomer desiring to produce your own indie short or feature, please click the link in the description below to have a chat with me and see how I could help you on your indie film journey. Be sure to check out my film on Amazon Prime, Hoopla, Tubi TV, and it's on a myriad of different streaming platforms. I will put it in the link in the description below. And that's it for me, guys. Until next time, see ya.